Spent a lot of time over the last, well, since I walked out of the office yesterday, it's been about 20 hours, I guess. Pretty close to that. I spent a lot of time reviewing the comments in media about Donald Trump's news conference yesterday after he presented checks for various veterans groups. This is related to the fundraiser that he had some months ago when he skipped a debate, and he took a lot of flack for that at the time from Fox because Fox lost a lot of people that night who would have otherwise been watching Donald Trump on stage, and many people in media said Trump was just putting on a show and he wasn't giving the money away. Trump called a news conference yesterday and he spoke to media and he was rather terse with them, saying, it takes time. We want to make sure that the right people get the money. And then someone pointed out, well, the newspapers have checked this out and you didn't send out half the checks until there was a story about the fact that they had still half the checks had gone out. He was still vetting other people. And then I guess at that moment they thought, well, we'll get the rest of the checks out. At one point, he called a reporter from one of the news networks a sleaze. This morning, I know there was a lot of chatter about it last night, but this morning, to tune in and watch some of the reactions on the cable news networks, I was sitting there drinking my morning coffee as usual, television on in the background. There is just all sorts of hand-wringing going on. Obviously, the media thinks that they're far more important in this country than they actually happen to be. Over at Morning Joe, which is dominated by liberal talk hosts and people who think that they run the country, they were just venting about it. And one of them even went so far as to say, well, calling John McCain, that was, not a hero. That was bad enough. But calling us out, now he's really sank himself. As if somehow it didn't sink Donald Trump when he called out John McCain. John McCain, if you recall, had spent about 6.5 years inside a box in a Vietnamese prison camp during the war with North Vietnam. And somehow these media folks think that by calling them out that this is going to doom Trump, even though the McCain remarks didn't doom him, which tells you how self-centered folks in the media are. In fact, the one person, she might be the most uber liberal on that entire show, Mika Brzezinski. Her father was a national security advisor for President Jimmy Carter and got us involved with the problems in Iran back in the 1970s that persist until this day. She said, we're not that important, folks. This is not going to hurt him. And I tend to agree with that. Before I became a talk radio host, I spent a lot of years in news media and across a wide spectrum from newspapering briefly to working in radio and television news. And I know, even on the local level, we were not that popular with a great many people. And on the national level, the media sure as heck isn't. And when Trump calls them out, it's only going to help him in the long run. And yet lefties can't see that. They live in that little bubble and they think, oh, nasty and crude and mean, and we're only doing our job. Well, nobody cares that you're doing your job. The fact of the matter is they want someone who's finally going to call you people out because you do not run the country, despite what you think. It's 10 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's the choices that media makes that shows you what media is all about. You may remember in 2004, media was promoting John Kerry's campaign as the Democrat Party nominee for president. Oh, John Kerry's a veteran. Yep, yeah. You conservatives should like him. Yep, yeah, he's a veteran. Yep, he's a veteran. Except, of course, that all of the other veterans thought that John Kerry was a scoundrel for what he said about them when he came home from Vietnam. He went before a Senate panel and testified that his fellow troops, what did he put it? Reminiscent of Genghis Khan, or Genghis Khan, as he called him. Well, these guys never forgot that. They looked at John Kerry and they thought to themselves, I don't want anything to do with this guy. And media, which thought, well, they were like Genghis Khan, thought, yeah, he's a veteran. Yeah. And in John McCain's case, John McCain has let a lot of people down over the years because he's not sure if he's a conservative or a liberal. And from a conservative viewpoint, people are fed up with the man. He's got a challenger coming up in a primary, as I understand it. And a lot of leading conservatives, once again, are behind his primary challenger. So what are these folks? Media did not really give you the detail. There was a group of veterans who were outside Trump's news conference. And one of them says, Trump does not speak for the veterans of America. As if this guy somehow, one person, speaks for every veteran in America. Well, it turns out he's part of the Clinton campaign. The Clinton campaign organized these guys to go up and show up out front. And media interviewed them. Has media explained all of this yet? That it's just these guys were campaign appendages for Hillary Clinton? And a friend of mine is a colonel in the U.S. Army. He's still on active duty. He sends me these poll numbers from the Military Times. Let me tell you something. The current men and women in uniform are still overwhelmingly Republicans. I mean, ridiculously high numbers. The general public would be stunned to see how many of these people are still Republicans, conservative Republicans to boot. And I would guess, yes, you're going to have a few malcontents among veterans who've been supporting the Clinton family crime cartel for years. But I'll come right out and tell you this. Most veterans, if you were to look at the surveys, you're going to find out once again, conservative Republicans, flag-waving patriots. So they don't go for this sort of stuff. There was one fellow who was on stage with Donald Trump, a guy by the name of Al Baldessero. Al Baldessero is retired from the U.S. Marine Corps. He gave 22 years of his life to the Marine Corps, and I bet he could whip the ass of every reporter that was in that crowd yesterday. And he decided to take on the reporters as well. Take a listen to his comments. Again, you didn't see much of this reported in mainstream media.
I would never, ever in a million years put my name on a candidate that did not, from his heart, look me in the eye and tell me he's concerned about veterans. That's Donald Trump. I met him over a year ago. I've been involved with many fundraisers. There are many scam artists out there. He did the right thing by vetting these groups there. If you look at some of the groups, they're giving 20 cents, 40 cents on the dollar, and they're spending the rest for, their, nice lavish trips. He gave 100%. The liberal media is the only ones that have been calling me on the foundation. All right, I'm the former chairman. I've been dealing with this stuff for years as a veterans activist. Stop using veterans as political pawns. You got a guy outside McCoy. Go do a Google search on his Facebook. He's out there, his pictures with Clinton. They are using veterans as political pawns. It must stop. Donald Trump is doing this for the heart. You're all focused on the way he's raising money, and you're not looking at the 22 veterans that are killing each other every day. You're not concerned about the thousands of veterans that are on wait lists. Look at his plan on his Trump's website. He talks about medical cards. He talks about fixing the VA. He talks about competition. I think the liberal media, and I've been dealing with you a long time, you need to get your head out of your butt, focus on the real issues. Thank you.
That's not the clowns in the national media clapping. No, no, they weren't doing that yesterday. One of them said to Trump, "Are you going to be this way if you're elected president?" Yes. The answer was yes. It's like, good. It's finally, it's just such a breath of fresh air to see someone put these people finally in their places. The guy raised $5.6 million. His intention was to raise $6 million. And then when he didn't reach 6, he threw in $1 million of his own. So it's actually $6.6 million that's being doled out. The Clinton Family Crime Foundation, as Rush Limbaugh called it yesterday, has sucked up hundreds of millions of dollars. It's influence peddling. And yet, where are your friends in the media on that? Well, you know what? A lot of them were giving money to the Clinton Foundation. They were. And here they are badgering Donald Trump about this. Hillary Clinton, she was for sale for the last several years after she left the State Department. You've got all of these people at all of these big banks who are trying to cause World War III right now with China and Russia. China and Russia won't play ball with the big banks. She's beholden to them, hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet her fellow travelers, because she says she's going to give some other people some free stuff and run up the debt even more massively, they go along with it. 8:16. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. This comes from the American Conservative. The editor of that publication, Daniel McCarthy, today says Trump is going to just mop up the floor with her before all of this is done. Why does he believe this? I jumped down here about 5 paragraphs. He says, unfortunately for Weekly Standard publisher Bill Kristol and Libertarian Party candidate Gary Johnson, this is not how politics works in the 21st century. The sky-high negatives for both nominees mean there is, in fact, less space than usual for a third or fourth party, for the simple reason that voting against someone they hate is more important to more voters than voting for someone that they like. The most important numbers for Trump aren't ones that might attest to his popularity, but those that demonstrate disapproval of Hillary Clinton. Votes against Clinton in the abstract could be votes for Johnson or the Kristol candidate, but in practice, voters who are serious about stopping Hillary Clinton and the Democrats will all but inevitably Vote for the major party alternative. That would be Donald Trump. 8:16 now. Bill Colley with you. And of course, his reference to Crystal. Crystal has supposedly recruited David French to run for president. Now, I know who David French is because I read the National Review, at least the online version of it anymore. I have not gotten the published version, the paper version, for many, many years. I used to be a regular reader of that on a weekly basis. I try to keep track of it online. Probably 4 times a week, I'm reading stories out of National Review. David French is an outstanding columnist. He's an American hero. He earned that designation on a battlefield. And yet, most people out there are, David who? So this guy does not stand a chance. He snowball's chance in Hades, if you will, of actually upsetting the apple cart for Donald Trump. It's like, go away, guys. Sit down, shut up, eat your medicine. I'm sick to death of other people, well-heeled people like Bill Kristol, whose idea of a good time is going to the opera, for crying out loud, telling me what a conservative is, and that if I don't follow who they want me to follow, that I'm not a conservative. First of all, good conservatives are in bowling alleys too. On weekends, they're not sitting around the dang opera listening to some fat lady sing. 8:18, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Charles Krauthammer speaking last night on a special report with Brett Baer, and he said that any attempt at this point by these people, the Never Trump crowd among the conservatives, is only going to give Trump more ammunition.
Whatever name it is, I think it's a mistake for conservatives to run another candidate with the explicit intent, essentially, of blocking Trump from winning. Either he's going to win, he is the nominee of the GOP chosen by the people. He's either going to win or not. And if he doesn't win, he should not be able to claim he was stabbed in the back.
And again, if you take it away from him because you decide you're going to muddy the field, well, David French may well be qualified to run. I've been reading his column for a long time. He's got a very extensive background. He's not just a writer for National Review. But, my friends, we have to stand back and look at this. You could throw in 8 or 10 names. Number one, they have to get on the ballot, at least in some big states where they could do this. It's doubtful that will happen. Number two, they have to convince other people out there that they're not playing spoiler. And number three, they have to find the money to actually run a credible campaign. And at this stage of the game, highly unlikely that that's going to happen. I've got a hard break coming up in just a few seconds, but I'll take some of your telephone calls in the next segment of the program. Also, I'd like to remind you, we've got, in fact, coming up just after 8:30 this morning, I believe it's Jeremy Dowley today. He's a physician assistant at Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls, Idaho. Tripp Family Medicine, of course, still looking for new patients, located on Fillmore Street directly across from the main post office. And they can often see you on the same day if you call in the morning and you've got an issue. And a reminder, Dr. Tripp and his family are going to Nicaragua on a mission trip in a few weeks, but his boys need to earn the money to go. So if you're looking for someone to cut the grass or clean the pool, give a call to his office. They'll line that up for you. 20 after 8 and 54. I think I mentioned to all of you that these libertarian candidates that are running this ticket with Gary Johnson and William Weld, when I knew William Weld many years ago, he was more liberal as a governor of Massachusetts than Michael Dukakis was. And then he ended up running for governor in New York, and that's when I met him. He didn't get through the primary system. He just stalled at that point. But why these guys are even calling themselves libertarian is beyond me. Telephone number to reach our program today, and they claim that they're going to mount a serious challenge. Yeah, they got a campaign bus held together with chewing gum and Band-Aids. News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And we have a caller with us at 824. You're up next.
Good morning, Bill. That guy might be right. Conservatives might hang out at operas, but you know who hangs out at bowling alleys eating hot dogs? Patriots.
Yeah.
That's who hangs out there. But, Trump is not my favorite guy. But I tell you, the one thing he's done that should open the eyes of every politician is when a bully bothers you, hit him back twice as hard, and he'll back down. Because these guys, they play double standards all the time. They asked him about his money. He gave 100% of the money back. Sure, slowly. He wanted to make sure it was handled by the right people. Hillary Clinton, how much has she brought in from very shady characters? And she gives out the minimum she has to keep it
For
legal.
crying out loud, her husband gave out soiled underwear and used that as a tax deduction after giving it away to Salvation Army.
I mean, these guys don't understand how much millions of dollars she does, and she gives out 15%. Where's the rest of the money go? Her, Bill, her daughter, her employees, everything else. It's not a charity.
Sure.
It's
I
a
gotta
scam.
I gotta tell you, and thank you for the call. I gotta tell you a story about Clinton. She was on some TV show yesterday talking about how much money she's contributed to the veterans, but it was all through, well, I helped create this tax program to take money from this group to give to this group. None of it. It's her personal fortune. Over at Washington Examiner, Timothy Carney writes, William Weld and Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidates, had their joint interview Tuesday on liberal MSDNC. And they said, we've never bought into this anti-choice, anti-gay sense of the Republican Party. Yet they'd like to recruit conservative voters. They said, in other words, we don't need those backward Christians as much as we need you MSDNCers. In January, Johnson said he would make it a federal crime for women to wear the burqa. Now, we have our issues with Muslims, but sitting there telling people what they can wear and not wear in this country? This spring, Johnson pushed aside freedom of conscience when asked in an Oregon interview about laws and lawsuits requiring caterers to participate in gay weddings. He took the big government side for coerced baking in the name of gay rights. When later asked about his anti-liberty view, he made the standard liberal conflation about selling off-the-shelf cupcakes to a gay customer, which is straight-up discrimination against a person, and refusal to participate in a ceremony, which is freedom of conscience. And according to Carney, this is just left-wing social engineering, and it's not libertarianism. 827, you're next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. Over the weekend in Chippewa, the Clintons marched in the Memorial Day parade. Their history for hating our military goes back to hating the ROTC in Arkansas. Their hypocrisy is just shameless. Lieutenant Colonel Patterson, who carried the nuclear football during Clinton Gore, wrote a book called Dereliction of Duty. The Clintons wouldn't let our military wear their uniforms in the White House except for the guys that carried the nuclear football, and they had to be talked into doing that.
Yeah, I got to dispute you on that one because I had a friend he got invited to a New Year's Eve party there and wore his uniform. Anyway, thank you. Just, there are certain things, these myths get started and they get a life of their own, but in some cases, we've got to make sure that we're factual about all of this. Otherwise, the other side will tear us apart. 28 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Now, the Clinton treatment of the Secret Service that we've heard about, that's true. One of my old football coaches from high school, he ended up moving on in the 1980s and coaching a school in another district in the next county. And a couple of years ago, he was talking with me, and he shared with me at the time, he was very upfront about this. He said that one of his former ball players had become a member of the Secret Service detail in the Clinton White House and said, you don't want to know half of what happened there and how they were treated as Secret Service agents. Very, very nasty, rude, rotten, low-life people. That's all I can say. We've got a short break coming up. Do want to mention we've got Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine on the way just after 8:30. Also, the summer heat is here now. Looks like we're going to have some temperatures in some parts of Idaho near 100 this weekend. Whether you need repairs for an air conditioning unit right away or would like to avoid problems in the future, you can call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric. Make sure the job is done right the first time and set yourself up for a great summer. You can see them at 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley or give them a telephone call, 678-0444. We'll do that one more time, 678-0459. That's 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. That's Ramsey Heating and Electric. Guess what? We're at 57 already, on our way well into the 80s today. It's 8:30. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.